I have always been a massive advocate for running a torch on a handgun. I truly believe it's one of the most important accessories you can have on any gun, but more specifically in this case, a handgun. So today I'm going to explain what makes a good pistol torch, what good brands there are, and a bit of a breakdown of the technical stuff and what you should maybe be looking at. Now, what use is a torch? There's the obvious that it's able to light up dark areas so it's easier to see, but there are actually loads of other uses. One thing is admin. Maybe you want to see a particular detail on a map or some notes that someone left you, and a torch will just help you read it a little easier. Another thing that a lot of people overlook is signaling. Let's say you have friends or someone you want to alert further away from you. A torch is a great way to get their attention. With a torch with the right amount of output, you can give them a quick flash and they'll know where you are and be able to help, or you can warn them of something else with it. Torches likewise can also be used to highlight things. Maybe your friends can't really see what you're pointing at or what you're trying to gesture towards, and you could just illuminate it with a quick beam. And finally, on that subject, it's brilliant for blinding people. Maybe you're in a situation where you need to blind somebody to get the advantage, and a torch with the correct output can do that just fine. So let's do a little technical breakdown, and I'm just going to put a bookmark on this. Maybe you're not too interested, but I'm actually going to tell you the three aspects that companies put on some of their torches, and they're not always very easy to decipher. And they are lumens, candela, and lux. Now, lumens, we all know, we see this in a lot of places. For instance, I know house lights are roughly about 25 lumens, to give you a rough estimate. But what lumen actually means, and what it represents, is light shining in all directions. This only tells us the total light coming out of a bulb or an LED. This does not account for, say, a focus beam, which is done with a thing called an optic, something that magnifies it in a specific direction. Now, we've all seen these lights from China that have millions and hundreds of thousands of lumens, but it doesn't make any difference if the candela or lux doesn't match up appropriately. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Candela. Candela is light shining in a specific direction and measured for intensity. And this is measured in like X thousands of candela. So to give an example of this, let's say you have a huge amount of lumens, let's say 50,000. And on a small amount of candela, they would spray in all directions. But on a higher amount of candela, the beam is focused and much smaller. And now we'll talk about this later, but higher candela isn't always exactly what you want. There is a nice middle ground that is typically, broadly and generally speaking, optimal, but we'll go over this a bit later. And finally, we have lux. Lux is a stat you see less often, but it is still relevant and worth knowing. Lux is how much light is hitting a surface, and if you know the candela and how far a target is, you can actually calculate the amount of lux that's hitting it. So this is the classic scenario. If you have a torch, you point it at a wall, and it leaves a nice beam in the middle, and you can measure the lux at the center of the beam. So, for example, you can have 10,000 candela, and if it is shining at something that is 10 meters away, that comes out to 100 lux. There are actually calculators online if you would like to calculate this. So now that we've got across the technical details of what actually makes light output and what could be more sought for, what actually makes a good torch other than this? And they're very simple, really. It's just the durability. How strong is it to rough tear and rough play? And I like to really go over the accessibility of controls. How is it to activate the light? Does it have multiple settings like strobe, momentary, constant, all things to consider when purchasing a light. However, it's also worth noting that there are many bad traits to look out for that come from particular torch companies. For one, if you can't easily find out anything from a torch other than its lumens, this can be a red flag. There are many companies out there who will advertise to you a torch with tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions of lumens and hope that that's enough to hook you. But as I've mentioned before, if the candela and lux isn't mentioned, maybe that's because it is not optimal or something that is you want to spend your money on. They like to hook you and dazzle you with these crazy lumens, which is a bit ironic. And that's just what they want. They just want your money for the cheap amount of lumens they have going. And another trait of bad torch companies is clones. And this is something I want to talk about because I've talked about clones before on this channel. Real torches and lights for handguns are not cheap. And there's a reason for that. It's because they're typically of good quality if you find the right one. And clones of these exist. Now, I would say that you try them at your own risk. And the reason I say risk is because a lot of clones come from countries with maybe not the same safety regulations or ethics to the consumer that other official and bigger companies have. Things like battery outages can be extremely dangerous, and that's actually something we will talk about in a second. So it's very worth considering, and typically these clones have to be lackluster in one way or another to become affordable. So they may look like a torch you prefer and would usually be a clone of something much more expensive, but they will cut back on certain costs that you can afford it, and it can be very noticeable and annoying. So let's go over the torches I've owned. I have 3 pistol lights with me today, and we'll go over them the order that I've had them, and then I'll tell you at the end which is my favorite and why. So here we have the Olight Valkyrie PL2. This is a torch I've actually owned since 2018. I bought it for £70. It is now worth £130. So don't argue that inflation isn't real. I don't believe you. And so some interesting things. The lumens of this torch are 1500, so quite a lot for a small little pistol torch. However, on the website, Candela or Lux is not mentioned. What I can say is that with my own eyes, the beam does seem kind of focused in a good way, optimal for sort of CQB and mid-range combat that you might go through, potentially up to sort of 70 meters or so. So why did I buy this? Simply put, I was needing a torch and I wanted something that was cheap with a strong output that would get me through a few days that I would need it. And so after I bought it, I took it to a few games and I had lots of fun with it. It was doing what I wanted, illuminating dark areas, being very bright and dazzly, and I eventually did end up enjoying it quite a lot. It became my main run for a fair few months. But it did eventually get replaced, and we're going to talk about why, but let's go over some of the other basics of this. So a 1500 lumen torch, it is mounted onto Picatinny rails with this sort of clasp for quick disconnect here. It actually comes with a spare mount here because I believe Glocks and certain other pistols are different with mounting, so it does come with a different one that's a different shape. And yeah, it's actually very secure. Anytime I would put it onto something and latch it down, provided I had the right clip, it was super sturdy and would not come off, it wouldn't rattle, and it wouldn't slide about. So actually a great little mount there. Controls. So this is how we operate the light itself. And it has these 2 little switches here. So these switches are prevalent on all the torches I've owned for handguns, and I'll explain what they do. So you have these 2 little switches on each side of the torch, and they can be pressed and clicked in. And these have different uses. So for instance, if you were to tap and let go, it would remain on, constant. And if you were to hold it and then let go, it will just be momentary, which reads really well on paper. But there were definitely times where I wanted to just use it temporarily on momentary and then move away and turn it off. And because I was doing it at such speed, it would stay constant on. So a little bit annoying. Another thing to notice is that this is obviously the same activation on both sides, so there's no left-handed or right-handed, it's just the same activation features on each side, which isn't prevalent with the other torches, but we'll talk about that when we come to them. You can also squeeze both of them together at the same time for strobe. However, this is really awkward. It doesn't feel natural at all when you are holding a handgun. Let me just grab something quick. So here we have it on my staccato, just to give you a little example. And so usually you'd be holding it like this, and I would put my thumb on the button here and press it when I needed it. It made the grip feel a little bit weird, and I did have to push in fairly significantly, and as you can see, that can turn the handgun a bit if you don't have a perfect grip. And as I said before, strobe is just so unnatural. There is no nice way to do this and to be effective with it. So it's more or less a useless feature given the way it has to be activated. As you can see here, the mount is great. Very happy with how that mounts, and it comes off great. Sweet. This runs off CR123 batteries that go in here. It is clearly marked which ends to put them up, which is something I like. And there is also an internal wall here which separates them so they don't slide about if you just have one in there, for instance. Battery life itself, This is something I want to talk about, and I have found this with other Olights as well as my own. The battery diminishes very quickly, and this is reflected very immediately on the lumen output. So whilst on the can it might say it does 1500 lumens, I find this to drop off really quickly. So that is something to keep in mind. Something else to notice was after a significant amount of time with my Olight, I found that it was starting to hiss at me when I would have the light on with batteries in. I'm actually going to put this to the microphone and show you, and you can see why this might be concerning. And so this is actually one of two reasons why I will never go near this light ever again. And so the other reason I will not touch this light is because there was an unfortunate case of an Olight torch exploding and killing the user holding it. That's right. Olight, I believe, are the only torch company in at least the weapon industry who have actually killed one of its customers through the torch. And that's a pretty awful blanket statement to say. There was probably something else going on, potentially the batteries they were using, but I hear the batteries they were using were actually branded by Olight, so it's a bit sketchy. But this is a common controversy and a bit of a meme on the internet of why you should never go near Olights. I think there are many other reasons why you should avoid this torch, but it makes me very uncomfortable that this torch has been known to be explosive in the past, as well as their other products, and that mine hisses at me now when I use any batteries in it, no matter what amount of charge they have in. So I never plan on using this light for my own safety, which, as you can imagine, is pretty disappointing for a torch that now costs £130. And on that note as well, this gets really hot. When I have this held down and I have it on constant, if I was to put my hand in front of it, I couldn't hold it there for longer than maybe 6 seconds. It gets that hot and it can be felt through the metal here. And it actually got to a point where I was too scared to have the light on for more than a second. So another concerning thing about this torch. So here we have my beloved TLR1 HL by Steamlight. I was very, very gratefully given this for free by Tap Airsoft from the US. Such an amazing gift, quite literally one of the best gifts I've ever had in my entire life, given how much I've used this. It was used at the time, so a lot of these scratches and marks you see actually weren't even from me. This is how it came. It was originally broken. I don't know how it broke, but the person who sent it to me fixed it, Aaron, at Tap Airsoft, and then he sent it to me for free. And I'll get on to later why he sent it to me for free, but this is a super awesome little gift. So, stats. This is 1000 lumens, and it has 20,000 Candela peak, so that's at full battery, nice and charged, ready to go, and that's pretty gnarly for a pistol torch. And whenever me and my friends go camping or we go to a festival, sometimes I'll bring this with me, not attached to anything, and I'll shine it about, and they're all very much wowed by how good it fires. Like it just has incredible output, nice beam, and just a really cool little torch. Speaking of beam, this can shine up to 283 meters effectively, which is very, very far and very, very cool. And so how did I find this torch when I bought it? And truth be told, I have not had one single problem running this torch. It has always been reliable, always been durable. It has never failed, had an issue, and I love it. I love the aesthetic, I love the shape, I love the way it looks on a handgun, and it is actually incredible light. I got this for free in 2019, but they can be bought for £180 GBP. And so the other thing I love about this so much, I think this is maybe the best any pistol light has had, in my opinion, that I've seen, is the controls. So these rear levers. So let me attach this to a handgun with this mount, and let me show you what they're about. So here you can see the lever on each side, And this makes it super friendly for ambidextrous use, and it actually offers a lot more than just that. So let me explain. So let's say you are right-handed like me and you want momentary. You simply just push down on the top of this left-hand side with your thumb, and that illuminates the torch. Very nice, and unlike the Olight, it allows me to keep a much tighter grip whilst being able to actuate it, probably because this is pushed out so much further and is so much easier to reach. I don't need to push so far. And also, if I lift it up, it stays on constant, which is very cool. So I can very easily flip between the two. There is no confusion there. Another awesome thing is just how accessible strobe is on this torch. With the Olight, you had to do the 2-finger movement, which was impossible to do effectively. With this, you just simply double tap down on this paddle and it will strobe. Amazing, really. That's exactly how it should be. Such a cool thing. Now, alternatively, if you're left-handed, the controls are inverted. So you actually have to push up for momentary and down for constant. And so that's flipped on this side. Another cool thing about this feature with the TLR1 is if you, say, mount this to a rifle at the top of the handguard at the very end, that will put it in this position. So say, let's just imagine the bottom of my staccato rail is the top of a wrist rail on a rifle. It still stays working with the handed that you are, which I really, really, really like. So very convenient for me as a right-handed shooter. Awesome controls. It's just extremely easy to press down, and definitely the most amazing control I've had with a pistol torch. And so for mounting, we have this little screw thing here. There are actually 2 types of mount for the TLR1, but I only have experience with this one, so I can only comment on this type. I believe this is the old type, so all new torches come with a new version. This can be tightened down with either a coin or a Phillips head screwdriver, or simply with your fingers. And something I will mention is that this mount is extremely strong, and even just finger tight here, I've never had this wobble loose or come free, and I love that. And to get it off, you just simply unscrew it till it's sufficiently out. You push in, and it just removes itself. It has this pushing mechanism to separate it. I've seen other optics have this, and it comes off just like that. So a very cool little mount, great controls. And then another thing would be battery life. So the batteries are kept in a very similar way to the Olight, except one thing that I actually prefer that the Olight does is it has that little wall to stop these rattling about. Say, for instance, I just want to put one in. This can rattle about, and it just can be a bit finicky to get them in the right positioning. So just something to keep your eye on. What I also like is it's marked on the sides here which way each battery should be in the torch, which is very useful because I'll be honest, I always forget. And so there we have by the markings. There we go. Lack of wall annoying me there. And just like that, pull the latch forwards and it's secure, not going anywhere. And just like the Olight, we'll talk about the lens. And this is my other favorite thing about the TLR1. The lens is totally replaceable very easily. You just simply unscrew it, remove the metal disc, put it to one side, and then you have your protection plexiglass. Now this is a sort of plastic really, and this is actually an aftermarket one that I bought from tapairsoft.com. It comes in a nice filtered yellow to match my signature brand, and you just put them on, screw this back on, and then you have replaced glass just like so. I actually have multiple of these in different colors, and they are just great. And so that's something I really love about this torch. As for construction, the walls of the metal are thick, they feel strong. There are some scratches on it, but there are no significant dents. So yes, definitely built very well. And something that I really, really like is this has a modular tail cap. Now I don't own it, but there is actually a tail cap you can get called the Long Gun Kit. And this allows a tail cap to be added to the TLR1 itself, and then a pressure switch. Say if you wanted to add this to maybe like an SBR, an SMG, or a long gun, as it's appropriately called. So there you have it, that's the TLR1, and I absolutely love this torch, and it was my go-to for absolute years, and I really love this thing. And finally, we have my latest purchase, a Surefire X300. Now, if you're a pistol nerd, you'll notice that this is the X300 rather than the new X300U. So this is actually an old torch that I bought from a sort of police auction. So this was actually used by an officer, and I bought it at an auction when it was no longer needed. It is not broken, it works perfectly. So I bought this in auction this year on eBay for £100. Back when Surefire manufactured the X300, this was about £300 to £400, pretty steep. And today they only make the X300U, which is also £300 to £400, depending on where you look. So after a lot of looking online, the lumen output on this is only 170 lumens. And I couldn't find anything about the Candela or Lux, mainly because this is quite an old torch. I think this is actually close to over 10 years old at this point. And the new version of the X300U has been upgraded to 500 lumens, so more than twice as bright than what I have. So why did I buy this torch? And the answer is I wanted experience with it, and it was a good deal. Surefire are known for making excellent torches, and I wanted something by them, and seeming as this was on offer, I thought I would grab it and see what I thought about it. And so far, I actually really like it. It has a very interesting mounting method, same sort of battery storage as the other brands, and very interesting controls that we'll talk about in a second. So battery life. I found the battery to last a significant amount of time before it started to dim. This is likely because it's only a small lumen output, and that's primarily what eats away at the battery, and that probably helps it prolong its life. Like the other two torches, this takes CR123As. So the beam of this Surefire X300. The beam is excellent for what it's designed for. So the X300 and the X300U are designed for home defense, and there's actually a reason they are a lower lumen count than most other torches. And this is because they want it to be a torch that you could effectively use in your home, potentially at night. So for instance, if you had a torch with extremely high lumens and candela, and you were to wake up in the dead of night and turn that on to look around your house for a noise or something you heard, you would dazzle yourself just by the way that light would refract around a room, especially if you were maybe panning across a mirror. So something that with less lumens will be less dazzling to yourself from a refraction, but still dazzling enough at maybe someone you were pointing it at. Another good thing is that the candela is actually wider rather than tighter, and that's because with a wider candela, it is a lot more effective for close quarter combat that you might have in a house. For instance, if you have a very tight beam, tight candela, high amounts of it, it's actually very difficult to effectively point that at someone. It is far more precise, and there's not as much spill. And so with less candela, you get far more spill, and it's far more forgiving at closer ranges, which is exactly what the X300 and X300U is utilized and designed for on a handgun. And so that's actually why I like this torch. I like this torch because it's great for CQB battles. It's durable so that if it gets hit or dinked or damaged in any way, it will survive. And it's not too dazzling for me to use, but dazzling enough against the person I'm shining it against. So let's quickly go over the controls. Here we have the similar tail cap to the other designs, and let me just put this on a handgun to show you. So here we have it mounted, and what we have is if we push down on the left side as a right-handed shooter, we get constant on, and then that flicks back up to the neutral position to turn off, and this can also push that way to also enable for constant on. So this is constant on whichever direction on the ambidextrous switch you push. Now, what a lot of Surefire X300 and X400 users don't know is this torch does actually have momentary. So most users will just use constant and push down like that and flip it up when they need to. But if you actually push into the button, you'll find that it is momentary, and this is actually by design. Surefire did design it to be this way. I don't think this was discovered by mistake, and it's actually super useful. And it's not hard to actuate, it doesn't require a lot of strength, and it just gives you a bit more versatility and easier to switch between momentary and constant. So I like that. I do prefer the TLR1 switch, but this is a nice take and comes from a similar mindset. Mounting. So the Surefire is mounted on this really cool system. Basically, you will pull these tabs down on the side here and then pull, and it will simply come off. And you can see that when you pull down these tabs, that little spot in the middle lowers and allows you to slide down a rail and then release, and it's on there incredibly solidly. I think of all the torches I own, this is the most sturdy with its mount. There are different types of plastic clasp for different type of wrist rails, similar to the Olight and TLR both have this feature. Also on the top here of the Surefire are these screws. These screws can be tightened down once it's mounted and you're sure you want to keep it there, just to keep it even more firm and hard onto your handgun. So I actually really like this mounting method. It's incredibly strong and something I really enjoy. It also looks incredibly smart, and I love the little aesthetic that it has. And like the other torches, what's the lens like? Truth be told, I've not had enough experience with this torch to fully understand the capabilities of its lens. However, from what I read elsewhere, Surefire make incredibly strong heads and glass. There are cases where they have broke under extreme stress, but for the most part they are pretty damn strong. As you can see, there are some serious dents here from whichever PC plod had it before me, and it seems to be still kicking, so that's nice and relieving. Unfortunately, this head cannot be taken off and swapped for a different head with a stronger output, similar to all the other torches I've talked about, but there's only really one pistol torch I know of that does that, and that is the new Mod Light pistol torch, which unfortunately I don't own, but if someone wants to send me one, I will be more than happy to talk about it. So which pistol torch would I recommend you get? And the answer is, it totally depends on the type of person that you are. I find the TLR1 is incredibly high quality and very well made, but is potentially more optimal for outdoor usage with more space and distance. I do love it, and it does still work in CQB, but I actually think the Surefire X300 is actually more optimal for a close compacted space. And I genuinely think these torches are about as good as each other, even if the TLR1 is significantly cheaper, more than half the cost of this bad boy. But they're still both incredible lights, and neither you could go wrong with. And finally, we have the Olight. I can't think of a single reason to own this torch. I think you would be far better off just saving money and purchasing a TLR1, given that these are £130, and the TLR1 new is £180. So you could simply just save the difference over a few months or so and get that as a replacement. In my opinion, the world does not need Olight torches. So yes, that would be my review of these three. It's important to understand what you need from a torch. You don't always need the highest lumens and the most candela. It is a balancing act. You need what fits the scenarios you are going to be in. There is no point having a torch with crazy lumens, crazy candela, that's huge, or a very specific profile if it's not going to fit the situations you're going to be in. It's not about who can spend the most money or look the coolest. It's about finding what's effective for you. And for me, it is between these two torches, and luckily, I own both of them. Thank you very much for watching this video. I actually had a lot of fun making this. I really love talking about gear, especially handguns and the accessories they have. My grandfather, before he passed, was a massive torch collector, and I'm sure if he could see me now, he would be hysterically laughing, knowing that eventually his passion for torches would rub off on me. So if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing. Comment below which of these 3 torches you think you prefer, and if you prefer the Olight, do tell me why, because I would like to know. And in that case, I hope to see you in the next video.